May we all start big things first with God. Amen. Okay, friends, we've been on a journey. We've looked a little bit this morning at just basic difference between leadership, administration, management. We've looked at mission, vision, values, strategic thinking. We've looked at budgeting and finance. We've looked at some of the practical administrative issues relating to employees, volunteers, and contractors. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about a management piece of human resourcing, and that is, how do we correct, motivate, and supervise people, whether they're volunteers or employees? These principles would be super helpful for you, I believe. So we start by thinking about a very simple text. It's from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, where the apostle reminds Timothy, "And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach to others." To me, it's a primary management and leadership text, disciple-making text. We should always be looking for that reliable person in our sphere of influence that we can be training the things that we know, both from the word and best practice, so they can be training others and developing others throughout their time as a disciple of Jesus and a leader in the church. So there's 4 things that we'll address, 2 pretty quickly, and then 2 that we'll kind of lean into. That's extreme ownership. You are responsible, so take responsibility for your actions, for those you lead as well. We have to have an appropriate span of control, understand that you can't oversee the world, you can't provide guidance and counseling and coaching and discipleship to everybody, but you can target a few strategically and know why. You should be able to find some specific ways to develop people that you're guiding, managing, leading, helping as volunteers that are very simple, that will help them and help you. And then when people just really aren't quite getting it done, how do you help them get it done? How do you correct people and help them move with you toward achieving something? That's the 2-minute drill. So let's take a look at this. First, just a very simple concept. I love the concept of extreme ownership, which comes from, I believe, a Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink, who writes significantly on leadership. One of my favorite leadership writers. I didn't think would be a military man, but he is. Extreme ownership, says Jocko, is the practice of owning everything in your world to an extreme degree. Sounds like a Navy SEAL, doesn't it? It means you are responsible for not just those tasks which you directly control, but for all those that affect whether or not your mission is successful. I'm going to break that down for you real quick, just as a basic principle of leadership and management. You are responsible. You are responsible for those you manage and the resources you manage. Take extreme ownership of it. If you're the leader of leaders, you're responsible for those you're leading. Take ownership of it. What that means is, if you see people not achieving what it is you'd hope they would achieve, it's not their fault. You need to take some ownership on that. You need to create the environment in which they can achieve what it is you're asking them to do. It's your responsibility as a manager or leader to make sure that the people you're asking to do stuff have the resources to do it, have the training to do it, have the support to do it. If somebody can't accomplish the task you're asking them to do, that's okay, but it's your responsibility as a manager to help find the person who can and help them find a place where they can serve appropriately. In other words, the basic idea of extreme ownership is, don't blame other people for what you might perceive as failures in your organization, the team you lead, or the church you pastor. Assume ownership for it and assume, as the person responsible for this group, you are responsible to find the best way to resource these people, correct, guide, encourage, exhort, whatever. It's not them, it's you. I don't know if that sounds too harsh or not harsh enough, but I can tell you that that will absolutely transform both your perspective as a leader and those that you lead. Blaming never helps anybody. Assuming responsibility and helping people move forward through difficulties is the heart of good leadership and healthy management. So another thing I'd like us to think very briefly about is just a principle called span of control, which is simply the number of subordinates that can be managed effectively and efficiently by supervisors in an organization. How many people can you directly supervise or oversee? I can tell you it's not an infinite number. There's a reason that most churches in America are between 80 and 200. The 150 people is the maximum number of people that most individuals can have a sustained relationship with. So if a pastor is the heart of a church and the church is primarily sustained by the relationships of that one person, then that church will never grow above 150. It can't, because it's all about that span of control. If the pastor's trying to do everything, the most effective he or she can be is about 150 people. However, when you begin to learn how to share that load, how to share the responsibility, and put yourself in charge of the few who can be in charge of a few others for various ministries and purposes, then you start to actually unleash the power of the church. And there are very few limits to what can happen then. We understand that that's true just from the Bible. Exodus is probably the first great place to look at this. Moses, who was trying to oversee all of Israel by himself, hearing all the problems, doing all the problem solving by himself, had his father-in-law Jethro sit him down and have this conversation. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything that he said. And what Jethro told him to do was choose capable men from all of Israel and make them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s. And they will serve as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases then will be brought to Moses, letting most of the simple ones being decided by those smaller groups. It's just a simple idea, right? That really about the biggest span of control in most organizations range between 6 and 12. No individual can provide an adequate amount of proactive, insightful management and guidance to more than that. And that's if you're a full-time employee. Jesus with his disciples actually had 12 disciples. That kind of shows span of control right there. But he really focused on 3. There were 3, Peter, James, and John, that he had most of his inner conversations with. I'm just sharing this because a pastor and a manager can't think that they can manage and pastor everybody. But what you can and should do is think about how you can give, remember, discrete job descriptions, discrete purpose, discrete reasons to do particular things to people, and then have those people supervise others that are part of that particular responsibility. In many companies, a span of control is organized or formed around an organizational chart. An org chart can look so different in every different organization, but your church should have an org chart. You should be aware of who's responsible for what, who's leading whom, who reports to who. Remember, on the job description, you got to have who reports to who. Well, how do you know that? You know that because of your organizational chart. Who's responsible for what aspects of ministry? This is nothing less than the very first thing we talked about. Everybody in the body of Christ has a different function: hands, eyes, feet, different spiritual gifts, right? Help, service, administration, leadership, teaching, preaching. They're all different. They're all absolutely necessary. And they all need to have some training, some development that are specific to those areas. So the best way to show that really is the org chart. Now, this is a very simple and not particularly effective way of showing an org chart. I just threw it up because I wanted to show in this particular church, there's one pastor, Lynn. Pastor Lynn has a volunteer, Jose, who oversees worship, a volunteer, Tammy, who oversees discipleship, and a volunteer, Isan, who oversees church administration. So in this particular church, Jose oversees as the worship leader, even though he's part-time, the audio-visual, the tech team, the video team, because in this church, they produce a weekly video that goes out to everybody. They record the services and make sure they're post-production ready to post on Facebook, etc. And of course, the music team. There's actually two at this church, one that goes in a morning service, one that goes in an afternoon service. Well, Pastor Lynn can't oversee everybody and talk to all the people on those teams, but Pastor Lynn can talk to Jose. And Jose talks to these other individuals. In fact, Jose doesn't talk to everybody on the video team. Jose talks to Hank, who talks to everybody on the video team. So you have very clear areas of control, span of control or span of influence. Tammy does the same in discipleship. In this church, it's organized for discipleship not in Sunday school or Bible studies, but through small groups that meet in homes in various regional zones, East Zone, West Zone, North Zone. So Tammy meets with the 3 zone leaders once a week, holds them accountable and encourages them for the number of people that are meeting in their groups. Each zone has a different number of small groups. The East Zone has 10 groups, the West Zone has 5, the North Zone has 6. Well, when a group gets to have 12 groups in a zone, then they form another zone. The South Zone is coming. And so soon there'll be a South Zone leader that Tammy also meets with on a regular basis. But Tammy is able to tell Pastor Lynn what's happening with discipleship because on a weekly basis, she's meeting with the zone leaders who on a weekly basis are meeting with their small group leaders. Same thing with administration, cleaning crew, volunteer crew, church maintenance crew. Pastor Lynn, of course, talks to everybody, sees them all on Sunday, but on a weekly basis or monthly at least, meets with Jose, Tammy, and Isan, and they just talk about strategy, purpose, accountability, support, and in that way, the church is able to continue to grow and be encouraged because there are clear definitions, clear roles, clear oversight, and Pastor Lynn isn't trying to do everything, and neither is Jose, Tammy, or Isan, or anybody else. Any questions at this point about the idea of span of control and org chart and how understanding this can help you manage your church and help people be more effective in what you're asking them to do? Yeah, Michael, I see your hand up.
In the org chart you have there, and I've seen many of them in different places, but in that one, and in the speaking of what we've done, I've been in a couple of companies where the number of meetings that a manager was going to was exorbitant. I mean, to the extent of 3/4 of their week was spent in meetings. And so even just managing the people didn't exist because they didn't have time to do it. In that org chart, it would appear that ideally no one person is in a meeting more than twice a week or time frame as they are seeing it.
In that
below
particular
them,
scenario, you nailed it. That's exactly right.
Below them and above them, that's it.
That's exactly
I'm
right.
reporting to those below me and managing them, and then I'm reporting to those above me and receiving directions from them.
You discerned exactly the healthiest form of an organizational chart. Exactly right. So yes, people are reporting to their direct reports and they're supervising and meeting with the people that they oversee, but they're not meeting with anybody else. That's why having that real clarity about what your job is and who you report to is super important. Michael nailed a problem that happens with a lot of churches in many organizations, and that is everybody's doing way too much, having way too many meetings, and you spend a whole lot more time talking about ministry than doing ministry, which needs to be avoided. Now, one pushback on that is often, well, we don't need any meetings. And that's not true. You need to have meetings in order to keep everybody, one, relationally healthy, and really the church is ultimately relational, on the same page so that you're able to continue to talk about the vision repeatedly. Leaders, that's the main thing a leader does. Manager, that's the main thing a manager does. This is what we're all about. This is what we're doing. Now, how are we living it out? Isan on the building and grounds committee, for example. So always keeping the mission clear or you get mission drift. But if you have more meetings than that, relational, missional, and practical, what kind of help do you need to get this done? What are the problems you're seeing in this zone, et cetera? Then you're having way too many meetings. So yeah, don't do meeting overkill. Don't ignore meetings, but when you're really clear about what your roles are in a church, you can actually accomplish it. You can accomplish not more than 2 meetings a week. Now that might even be too much for some people. Different churches need to look at it differently, but don't ignore meetings. Don't overmeet. Okay, so what happens, manager, leader, when you have somebody that's new? We talked about onboarding and training. You might not be the right person to do all the onboarding and training for everybody. God forbid that I would be somebody leading the worship leaders. I am terrible at it. I can't sing. I don't know what a harmony is. I'm terrible with tech for that kind of stuff. In every way, I'm the worst possible person. But I know I need to pair somebody who's learning how to do the worship team stuff with a solid, competent worship team leader so they can learn. Same thing is true with a bookkeeper. The same thing is true with the youth pastor. The same thing is true with the janitor. Find somebody that can help them do the job. And a very simple thing to always remember, doing training, there's 4 aspects of it. It's not rocket science, but you start with, okay, you're the new janitor. I'm going to do it, and you're going to watch. The first 2 weeks, I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to show you how we mix the chemicals. I'm going to show you where the mop room is. I'm going to show you where the power room is. I'm going to show you how to clean the pews. You're going to come and you're going to watch. That's great. 2 weeks after that, you're going to help me do it. So I'm going to be there, and you're going to help dust off everything. You're going to see what I do. You're going to make notes. 3rd week, I'm going to watch you do it. You are going to actually be mopping up everything. And if you need help, I'm there to help. I'm so there. I will help you with any questions, and we'll get through it together. The 4th time, you don't help them at all. You just watch. And watch, by the way, might be an inspection of the work that was done afterwards, an encouragement of it. But very simply, this way of thinking about developing somebody that you're onboarding and providing training for a new job, if you skip any of these steps, you let that person dangle without the support they need to do the kind of job you need to have done to fulfill the mission of the church, or of your company, or of your classroom, or of whatever organization you work for. I do, you watch. I do, you help. You do, I help. You do, I watch. I don't think there's any questions on that, so I'm going to move right on, but I really encourage you to take that to heart, and don't let anybody start a job in the church without this kind of support if you can all avoid it. So I'm going to skip the question piece and go straight to providing feedback. What's the best way to help develop people in your church, your volunteers in specific, but employees as well? And I would suggest that just giving feedback on a regular basis is the most important thing. Don't wait for an annual performance review, and don't let people talk about the employee or the volunteer behind their back. Do things directly. Here's how you do it. You never let good work go unnoticed. You never let poor work go unnoticed. Never let bad habits go unnoticed. And you'll find a way to turn around dead end work. So let's think about that a minute. I think most pastors are better at this than providing negative feedback, but notice the good work, and always notice the good work. Notice it as soon as you can. Tammy, you did a fantastic job when you were leading the worship service this week. In specific, I love the way you transitioned the music to a scripture text and prayer and to the next piece of music almost seamlessly. Man, it's been a little rough with transitions, but you nailed it this week. Good job. When you see something positive, note it, but note very specifically what it is. Otherwise, good job could be anything. Maybe Tammy was thinking, oh, it's because I wore a bright pink bow tie and happened to sing like Dolly Parton this week. That must be what the pastor meant. And so rather than focusing on transitions, she focuses on bright, colorful outerwear and singing like a goat. Oh my goodness, that's not what you wanted to encourage. So be very, very specific about the feedback that you're giving. Of course, it's good to do this as we encourage each other every day. We keep our hearts from being hardened by sin's deceitfulness, according to the book of Hebrews. More important, maybe, is to also notice bad work. This is harder. So again, to use Tammy as an illustration, your church is working on healthy transitions in worship. It's been clunky. It needs to be smoother. You know it. They know it. You're talking about it. But here's how you need to go about it. First, never say it in public. You can say something positive in public. Man, do that all the time. But never say something that's negative in public. Keep it private. Tammy, would you mind if we had a few minutes after the worship service today? Keep it private. So you're alone, you're private. And man, the worship service, the songs were rocking. It was so good. I can see how much work that you are doing with the worship team. It felt as if there might have been a little bit of difficulty with the transitions. Did you feel that too? And Tammy will almost certainly say something like, yeah, I did. Well, I wonder, what is it that you think could have been better? Now, it's really important. The best possible way to approach noticing bad work is to give the person that you're talking to first the positive feedback. This part of it's really good. Noticing the part that's a little bit clunky, not quite right. But then instead of giving them the solution, help them choose what it is that they could have done differently. Let Tammy come up with the 3 or 4 things that you guys already talked about anyway. So as she articulates it, it's going to be more helpful. Yeah, we weren't actually prepared this week. We didn't practice. And so we had to make up our songs on the fly, and that was what kept it clunky. That's interesting. So what do you think you could do next week that might be better? Well, of course, we'll practice. That's great. And we'll make sure that we go straight from one song to the next, and we'll have it prepared. Fantastic. Way to go, Tammy. I'm so glad. So it's important to give people a chance, one, to recognize that you notice something a little bit off kilter. That's not a bad thing. Feedback is important. In fact, it shows you care. If you don't notice either the positive or the negative, what's somebody going to think? They're going to think you really don't care what kind of job they're doing. The best way to show care is to give feedback. It's also really good to be as encouraging as possible when you can, and to let somebody make their own choices about how to improve. If people are making mistakes, that's okay. Frankly, it's inevitable. I'm pretty sure you've made mistakes. When we make mistakes, they're trying. So Tammy does worship service the next week, and her transitions are pretty good, but man, they really muffed the sound control. The drum was way too loud and it outdrowned the singer. Okay, I mean, you have the same kind of conversation, but you don't fire Tammy for not doing her job. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody can learn from them too. I actually love Shaquille O'Neal, amazing player, one of the worst free throw shooters in the NBA. Every time he went to the line, I was certain that whichever team he was playing for was going to have a heavy groan. And it's true. There was even a strategy. People would very specifically foul him, so he would be forced to shoot free throws because other teams knew he couldn't make them. But thank goodness he kept playing and kept trying, or the Lakers never would have been a championship team. So way to go, Shaquille O'Neal. Mistakes mean you're trying. Now, friends, here's one thing I want to talk about that's frankly one of the harder things for managers and leaders to deal with, and that's bad habits, things that aren't really bad performance. I mean, the person is showing up to work on time, the person is singing the right songs or preaching the right message or leading the kids or serving the food in the proper way. They just happen to have some bad habits that are really kind of annoying or a little off-putting. And those are the hardest to actually deal with, but you have to deal with them because they need to know so they can improve, and they need to improve so your church can make a more positive impact than those that call the church their home or the community they serve. So the first thing is to notice it. Again, keep it private, keep it positive, set the tone. I'll tell you how, and be direct but gentle. And it is important, as Proverbs tells us, slack habits and sloppy work are as bad as vandalism. But let's just say that Ted here has some body odor, and Ted's body odor, it's really quite noticeable. Now, one thing I want everybody to know is that when you're talking about bad habits, everybody has bad habits. Everybody has body odor. Everybody smells in some way. There's no doubt about it. So when we're talking about noticing and correcting bad habits, we need to be sure that we're setting the tones correctly. And here are the two phrases that I have found absolutely indispensable when it comes to talking to people about some bad habits. I feel awkward and a little too. You set the tone with the bad habit conversation. Man, Ted, I am so glad that you show up every single Saturday morning to provide food in our service to the homeless in this church. Don't know that we could do it without it. You are a highly valuable member of our team, and I love it. And I can see as you interact with people that you feel the same way. It's a good thing. So I feel a little awkward about this. Now, friends, the moment you say that phrase, I feel a little awkward, that does two things. It sets the tone. It's not a negative tone, but it's not a particularly happy tone. And you're about to talk about something that needs to be corrected, but you feel just as awkward about it as no doubt you're about to make Ted feel. So when you say, I feel awkward about this, sets a humble tone, but it's clear that you're about to talk about something important. Ted, you're great. You show up all the time. We couldn't do without you. So I feel a little awkward about this. But sometimes your body odor is a little too strong. Now, a little too is a critical phrase because, again, everybody has body odor. Everybody has some kind of bad habit. Little too doesn't say you shouldn't have any body odor. It's just a little too strong. Now, when you say that, it may be accepted well right away. Usually it's not. I feel a little awkward about this, Ted, but your body odor's just a little bit too strong. And I wonder what you think you can do about that. What do you mean my body odor is a little bit too strong? Well, even as we're sitting across the table now, it smells as if you might have missed a few too many showers today. And actually, we can see that some people aren't going to the station where you're serving, and that might be the reason why. What do you think? Very often, a conversation like that will lead to, oh my gosh, I didn't think anybody else would notice. I don't have access to a shower. There's a problem with it. I don't have a washing machine or whatever, all kinds of things. That's not a problem. Those are great responses. Man, Ted, I understand. How can we help you with that? Because we really want you to be a part of the team and somebody that can really be attractive to other people. I think you want that too, right? Well, yes, I do. Well, good. Then work with solutions. And usually that's the case. Sometimes it's, I can't believe that you'd be so judgmental. How could you be so judgmental on the way that I smell? That's just ridiculous. Ted, I know it sounds judgmental. In fact, I said I was awkward. I really do feel awkward about this. But I'm saying this for your benefit because right now, smelling a little too strong is something that's preventing you from having the kind of relationships that I believe you want in this church and in your life. So I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying this because I think if we can get a handle on it, you're really going to be rocking this world. What do you think, Ted? Well, I'll give it a shot. Anyhow, let me suggest that if you ignore these awkward habits, the person who is loud talking in church all the time, the person who gives people those awkward, slightly suggestive hugs, perhaps, those people that, this is hard, who might dress in a way that is extremely revealing, whatever, things that definitely need to change for their benefit and for the benefit of the church. The best way to approach that are these two phrases. I feel awkward, but it's a little too loud, a little too close, etc. Okay, before I hit this next section, I wonder if there are any questions or comments about some of the basic ways that we can manage our human resources. Span of control, assuming responsibility, and noticing good work, bad work, and awkward behavior. Okay, great. So are you ready for the next session, which is the 2-minute drill on how to turn around bad behavior? I think you'll like it. If not, that's okay. I feel awkward about this, but I think people that don't like my lectures are a little too smart. Okay. How do we turn around dead-end behavior? How do we turn around work that is really difficult? Whether you're a paid employee or a volunteer, a member of the board or pastoral staff, sometimes people just aren't getting the job done. And you've observed, you've given feedback, you've talked to them multiple times, you've had the awkward conversation, whatever, and it's just not happening. Well, this is kind of a make it or break it quick way to go about helping people change. And it's simple: state, wait, remind, ask, and agree. State what you observe, wait for the response, remind of the goal, ask for the solution, and agree together on the next step. Now, this doesn't take long, and don't make it long. But let's say you have a conversation with your youth leader. Your youth leader has agreed to lead the youth every Thursday night, to show up at 6 o'clock, to lead for 2 hours. And the youth leader has been showing up at 6:30, and the teens are sitting around the church absolutely unsupervised for half an hour. Now, they all love the youth worker, but this behavior has to change. So you simply state what you observe. Don't go into anything personal. It's completely behavior focused. I'm going to keep picking on stinky Ted. Ted, you've missed, in this particular case, you've been late to 3 youth meetings in a row. For 3 weeks, you've shown up at 6:30, not 6. That's it. You just state it. And you wait, and you quietly look at Ted. You're not making any personal judgment. You're just stating, Ted, you've been late 3 weeks in a row. Wait. The awkward silence you should never fill. Wait. Let Ted be the next one to talk. Don't let anything other than Ted's words come out of that conversation. And it will almost always be an excuse. Almost always. Well, Pastor, we agreed to start at 6, but the traffic is so bad. And, I've got 3 kids at home and helping them with their homework. I'm just not quite getting it done on time. For some reason, I'm not making it. All of these different conversations. Now, what's really important is that you need to focus on the behavior. You need to focus on Ted's response and on the goal. The goal is to actually get Ted to show up to the meetings on time. And the behavior is that he's late. If he brings up stuff like relationships with family, that's super important, right? Or relationship with you. Man, I really don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm really sorry I'm late. Those things don't matter. What matters is behavior. You state, you wait. Ted makes Ted's excuse. Traffic and kids are keeping me late. That's when you simply remind Ted of what that goal was and why you're doing it. Ted, we agreed that you would start leading the youth group at 6 o'clock every Thursday night. It's super important because as a church, the church is counting on you to lead these kids, to set a positive example. That's it. Then ask, so how are you going to be at the youth group this Thursday night on time? State, you've been late 3 times. Wait, the excuse will come. Kids, traffic, state. We agreed you would be at the youth group at 6 o'clock on Thursday nights. Now, how will you make the next meeting is the critical pivotal point. This is also where Ted is likely to come up with lots of excuses. You don't understand how difficult it is for me. You don't understand how hard it is to be working for my company, taking care of my kids. I mean, I'm just doing this because I kind of want to help out the church or whatever. I find a useful statement is everyone's life is complex. Ted, everybody that's serving this church has a whole lot of things going on. And I'm sorry that it feels difficult for you, but we depend on you too. We depend on you too. So, Ted, how are you going to make it to the meeting on Thursday on time? Ted will usually come up with a few ideas. Well, I guess I could leave work earlier. Now, this is really important because a person needs to visualize what it is they can actually do that's different. You can't visualize it for them. They need to visual. You're not the one who plans and coordinates their complex life. Only they can do it. I'll need to leave about 15 minutes earlier, and I'll need to ask my wife to do the homework on Thursday nights with the kids. Well, that sounds like a great idea, Ted. Do we agree that you're going to leave a few minutes earlier and have your wife help with the homework so you can show up to the youth group meeting on time? Yes, I agree. So in this example, I say Friday, I'm using Thursday. So you're going to be at the youth group this Thursday at 6 o'clock, right? Yes, I am. Well, that's great. I hope things go well at home. Good job. Okay, that's how you help turn around dead end work. State what you observe. Let the person talk about why they didn't do what was expected of them. Wait. Remind them of the goal, the requirement that you and they have already agreed to. They'll complain, keep it focused, ask for their solution, and then agree together about what the next step is. Okay, I hope you can see how this might be helpful. I've used this in one degree or another in every organization I've worked in for about 20 years, and it's super, super helpful. It gives the other person the responsibility to make solutions, and it gives you both a quick and easy way to agree together. Any questions about turning around dead end work through state, wait, remind, ask, and agree? Okay, so before we take a break, I'm going to put Mao on the spot, if that's okay. Mao, I have been your lead usher at your church. You've asked me to do it. I've said yes, I've agreed. I so totally love the church, but I have been coming late to church now for a month, and people aren't being greeted. I'm going to go ahead and throw that slide up again so you can have something to follow if you would like. But could you talk to me and help me through how I can become an usher who shows up on time?
Hey, Mark. I've noticed that you have been late to our services and we're kind of dependent on you. Is everything okay?
Don't even ask if everything's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Say that again and wait for me to respond. State the behavior that I'm not hitting.
Hey, Mark, I've noticed that you've been late to our services.
Uncomfortable silence. Now I realize you're not going to say anything. Yeah, traffic is a bear. Can you believe this Bay Area traffic?
So I just want to
So,
remind you. So I just want to remind you that we are dependent on you. Our service times are 11 o'clock and we we need to make sure that we have you to greet, our visitors.
That sounds really important, but I mean, you know how hard the traffic is.
I understand, but we do have to make sure that we are servicing and delivering upon our words to our community. So can we depend on you?
Yeah, I suppose.
Or how can I make it different for you?
Ask me to come up with the solution.
Oh, okay. So how can we be dependent on you?
Now, that's a good question, Mal. A question that will help shift the neurology of the person you're talking to so that they begin to envision a different pattern is to ask them, so how can you see yourself getting to church on time next Sunday? Try that.
So how can you see yourself to be here on time?
Okay, well, I need to leave earlier. And fact of the matter is, I have to tell you, I'll confess, I'm late because I stopped for Starbucks on the way to church. And I just started doing it. Man, I love that coffee. But tell you what, I'm going to stop stopping at Starbucks, and I'm sure I'll get to church on time.
I appreciate it.
Now, get us to agree together that that will happen.
Sounds like a plan.
Yes, very good. It does sound like a plan. I'm really sorry I let you down. I'll not let you down in the future.
I appreciate it.
Most excellent. Okay. It is really important when it comes to managing people. One of the things we think about in terms of managing people is that we are actually managing people. That's like in some ways they were objects that we can just move around on a board and they'll do what we want. It's always best, whenever possible, to help people self-manage. And if you can help people self-manage, to believe in what you're doing, they already believe in what you're doing. That's why they're in your church. They believe in you. They believe in your church. But you need to give them, everybody, the permission to creatively think for themselves about how they can achieve what it is that you're asking them to do. So always put on them the opportunity to, if you're noticing bad behavior, come up with solutions about how it can be fixed. If you're asking for a change in behavior to stop that dead end, always ask them for the solution about how it can be fixed. I guarantee if you offer the solution and they try and it doesn't work, it's your fault. And if you offer the solution, well, they probably won't do it anyway because you offered the solution. So let me just tell you. So if they can generate their own solution and you can agree on that solution, then you just unleash the power of God to work in the heart of a willing servant who wants to do stuff because it's their idea anyway. And now they're doing it with a team. Okay, super cool. Friends, we're going to take a 5-minute